Ladies and gents, welcome back. Every week I try to bring Marty up north and to, well, get a better perception on what's been going on around Canada for the week. And, well, no exception this week. Marty, welcome back.
Hey, Clyde, how's it going?
Great.
Good.
Well, and the reason why is because I wanted to bring this story up to you, and it's a funny one. And this is the bill C-18. And I think it's a funny one because it's a perfect case for people who don't understand economics, the idea of praxeology, the logic behind intended consequences and unintended consequences. And this is one of those cases perfectly suited. Now, the bill C-18, it says here, it's called the Act Respecting Online Communication Platforms and Make News Content Available to Persons in Canada. That is the name of the act. That's what the intention is. Now, the methodology for it is to, well, they wanted to create an agency, essentially, a registry of different agencies, news agencies, and they wanted to say who was a reputable source and who was not a reputable source. That was part of it, but
that's part of it, yeah.
The big one that's actually made news as of this past week was the part of the bill that tells social media platforms that they have to pay if links to one of these reputable sources is put online on their social media platform, and it would be the platform itself that's responsible for paying for it. And what I found really funny, it was a case, and it was a story from CTV News a few weeks ago, where Rodriguez, the heritage minister, who's trying to push this bill, he was saying how they were trying to get away from advertisement revenue on CBC and get more of a user-based revenue. And they had already started counting the money that they were projected to be making on these social media platforms to the tune of $300 million. The real interesting part of the news story is immediately after it passes, Facebook puts out a post. So it reached royal assent. It's been passed. And Facebook made an announcement. There will be no more news allowed in Canada on their social media platform, period.
So it totally backfired, but great intro. Now, and I just took about 4 or 5 notes. I mean, you brought up 4 or 5 points that each of them I think we need to break down a little bit. So let's start with this one, right? So I always ask this. I mean, when a government passes a law, in my opinion, it's because there's a need for a law. There's either people somehow or other need to be protected, or maybe businesses or Canadians in general or something. And generally, when the government proposes something, it's usually a problem that we've heard of. Now, if I ask the average Canadian, what's Bill C-18 about? What's the problem that the government's trying to solve? Most people are going to go, I have no idea. Like, what is the problem that C-18 is trying to solve? Well, I mean, between you and me, I think the government got approached by some lobbyist groups that represent, let's say, the media, the failing mainstream medias have a problem. And they went to the government and they're like, we need more money. So this, at its core, this is one of those things. I mean, in this bill, like you said, the funny title, they constantly talk about intermediaries, and the intermediaries that they're talking about are the Facebooks and the Instagrams and Google and places like that. So we have a failing industry. We have a failing mainstream media in this country, and the government sees an opportunity here to go and get some money out of those intermediaries. Am I getting it? Is that the core of it? Do you see it kind of the same way?
So that's the core of it. And a lot of people's reaction online, people who talk about the news, when they heard about the bill, were, why is it that the government's going to pick who is a reputable source and who's not a reputable source? And that seems very unfair. And there was news. I mean, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not a source. I mean, I'm one reporter. I'm not an agency, right? But there are other agencies that said that they would be denied, like True North, Rebel News, a bunch of other groups that are independents, and they were told, no, you're not going to be the news. These people are the news. And then there was that contention there, so they wouldn't be on the receiving list for who's getting money from these social media platforms. But then,
Which brings up a couple of points, right? So I think that's ass backwards. First of all, right? I mean, when I think of a company like Google or Facebook, I think of them as a company that built huge infrastructure,
Yeah.
and we should be paying them, or people who want to use that infrastructure should be paying them, not the other way around. As an example, I work for a pipeline company. When I worked for pipeline companies, we built the pipeline, and then we would charge somebody to come on our pipeline. Now there was a few regulations to prevent sort of monopolization. So if the rule was to sort of try and make sure that Google wasn't entirely monopolizing the domain, I'd be okay with that. But if the rule is, hey, Google, you built some great infrastructure. We, the government, we didn't even pay for that infrastructure. And by the way, we now want you to take your beautiful infrastructure and pay people who are failing, such as the CBC or CTV. Wow, like that's, to me, that's completely backwards.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
I mean, if CT, go ahead. Sorry.
so I would say I would argue we're already paying for the infrastructure, and we're doing so in an economic way that makes sense. So people are paying with, people won't like this, with their data, with aggregate data on their user profiles and habits and all of these other things. But they're also paying with their eyeballs. They're paying with advertisement eyeballs. So people are being served ads. They're getting those ads. So these social media companies are getting paid handsomely, and this works out in a free market way. And if people don't like that idea, go to another platform. Go to Twitter. You can go to Google. You can go to Facebook. You can go to YouTube. There's a bunch of them, right? So, and that's
I mean, you know, if I go back 50 years, instead of Google 50 years ago, you had somebody who owned a newspaper.
Yeah.
Now they owned the newspaper, and they also owned, let's say, a newsroom, but they didn't have enough of their own newsroom to fill the newspaper, so they would offer services. They would sell advertising, and if I was an independent writer and I wanted to write a story about something, I could pay and have my little story on that newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
The newspaper, well, or the newspaper paid me in some instances, but it's a free market. We are free to use each other's services. So, but we're going around because it's an interesting topic. But the other thing I want to make sure, you know, that I think most Canadians need to understand is, do we seriously think that if Google or Facebook pays something to the federal government, that the federal government suddenly takes that money and purely reallocates it to other media companies like CTV or True North or whatever? It goes into general coffers.
Mm-hmm.
Like once it's in the general coffers, what changes? What changes after this rule? For, you know, the government's telling us that it'll help whatever. No, it'll just provide money to the government, and the government will continue to allocate the money to whoever they choose. I'm guessing CBC in for the most part.
Well, here's where
you're not going to see a penny of that.
Here's where the whole law of unintended consequences comes in. So they say that they're going to, for one, decide who's going to be the arbiters of truth or the arbiters of news. And then secondly, they said, we're going to make sure that any links that go out to these individuals, there will be a monetary remuneration for those individuals. All it did was it created a situation where Facebook has an absolute incentive now to make sure that those links never are visible on their platform, and all other platforms as well, right? So but this is the funny part, is it actually helps out individuals like myself who are on the platform. So like I put reels on Instagram, and people can share those on Facebook, and they're still free to share those, and they don't have to pay me. I'm not getting paid anything by it, but they're not able to see stories from CTV, CBC, Global, all of these big players. They're not able to see that on their feeds.
No, this is going to completely backfire. I think it's already backfiring. You're right. I mean, you know, for your viewers who don't completely understand this, yeah, like if I'm on Twitter, so you know, I create my own content, but sometimes I'll go and find an article on, you know, on a platform on somebody else. I'll see an article by Rebel News, for instance, and I like that Rebel News article, so I'll take the link and then I'll post it on my Twitter, and I'll put a comment. So now what's going to happen? Imagine if every time I was going to click on that link, before I could share that link, it says, hey, this link is $3. Do you want to pay $3? I'd be like, I'm done. Forget it. I'm not going to click it. So in Canada, that link is now going to cost money. So if I'm looking for an article, a story on something happening in Ukraine, and I want to share it and I want to use that as part of my commentary, I'm going to go to the Rebel News. Oh, they got a story on Ukraine. Oh, but I need to pay $3 to put it on YouTube. Forget it. I'm going to find another story in Ukraine done by Fox News or by CNN or somebody else, and I'm going to click on their link and I'm going to put it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And so the revenue for the government is going to go down, and the big losers are going to be the Rebel News, the CTV. Everybody's going to be a loser, because literally, if I had to click on the link and it came up, it said, this link is $3, I'm not paying for it.
Well, this is why I was saying agencies like Rebel News, True North, and the like, they're not eligible for that status, so they will be exempt from this rule. So you'll be able to share their content, but not the big players, is what I'm getting at. Because
is that is that the way it's written already? Because
that's the way that they've been perceiving it, and the regulation has only just been passed through,
right,
and it hasn't gone through its actual like regulatory stage and implemented yet. But Facebook is already preemptively saying all the big players, you're off the site, done.
You're off the site, yeah. Because I read parts of the act, and the body that decides is the CRTC, the Canadian Radio and Television Council, or whatever they're called. So they're the ones who are going to make that call. But are you saying they've probably already made some calls, or if they haven't made some decisions, yes, Facebook has already seen the writing on the wall. I haven't gone in detail in Facebook. I haven't noticed. So does that mean that I should, if somebody was going to do a story on, Canadian forest fires on Facebook, is it already being suppressed? Like, I'd have a hard time finding a CTV story on forest fires on Facebook if I look today.
I'm imagining so. I don't use Facebook, but this is what they've publicly said moving forward. No more major player news, and they have to put a series of URLs in their system in order to do that, and they're going based on what the government is pushing forward as the implementation. So, and there would be lawsuits actually if they banned other people that were not seen as Canadian content or whatever, or didn't apply for that. So I'm sure they'd be very careful when it came to independence, but the big major players are going to get punished the most. What the other thing that you kind of got backwards on this one is it won't be the users that have to pay the fee. It'll be the platform itself that has to pay the fee. And
I was putting myself in the shoes of the platform.
Okay, saying, right.
So whose content do I put on in, and they're going to say, well, I'm not going to do it. But
so all they'll do is just they'll allow you to post it. It'll just never show up on anyone's feed. That's where it is.
It is such a poorly thought out law. Like, it's, I'm sure it's somebody who petitioned, what's his name? The guy with the big beard, like
Pablo Rodriguez. Yeah.
Pablo Rodriguez.
Discount Kenny Rogers.
Or he's kind of saying it's part of his mandate letter, but it's like I said, if you ask a typical Canadian, is this an issue for you? If you ask a typical Canadian, do you care that the CBC is not making any more money, is going out of business? Most Canadians wouldn't care. And this is a weird solution. The solution might have a little bit of legs if let's say Google or Facebook was a Canadian corporation. But what I think, this is pure ego on the part of our Canadian government to think that we'll have an influence on an organization like Google. I mean, if we tell Google that doing business in Canada is more costly than doing business in the US or in China or in Sweden, they're going to say whatever. We're a market of 40 million Canadians versus billions around the world. So but it did pass royal assent, which is like, wow.
It did. Wow. So they're going to work on the regulatory side of it. So it's going to get handed off to the CRTC. They'll, just like C-11, it hasn't really taken into effect. The CRTC is going to look at this and decide where they actually implement these rules. But it's really interesting CRTC, because the other part of this is, not only does it hurt those platforms, or sorry, those agencies on the platform, but it hurts them elsewhere, because where they derive a lot of their revenue, at least 30% of their revenue for CBC is, and this is by their own account, is through advertising. And if they can't drive traffic from social media, why do people who make video content go to Twitter and all these other social medias to share our videos? This is where we draw people in so that they can come see where the paywall is. And on YouTube, for YouTube content creators, the paywall is advertisements that YouTube provides. You could have paywalls on articles, but no, they drive ad revenue. It's not.
Clyde, the more we talk about this, I honestly can't see this being even a lobbying from CTV or from the private sector. I mean, I can't even imagine that any Canadian mainstream media lobbied the government for this kind of solution. This has to be this was concocted internally by the Liberals in their own, in their own bubble to get some extra revenue, and it's going to backfire. They're not going to get revenue, and they're going to hurt the industry that they claim to be helping, I think is what they're going to do.
And then the further thing that would hurt them is because a lot of people will say that the CBC and a lot of these are mouthpieces for the Liberal Party. Well, it's hurt their own propaganda wing is what it has. And they're going to reach less people, and it'll actually open up the door for a lot of independent media organizations that don't claim to be purely Canadian content will be able to fill in that void. That vacuum is going to get filled in very quick by a lot of clever entrepreneurs, is my opinion.
Right. Wow. Interesting. Okay, well, I guess we'll wait and see a little bit. Now you've given me food for thought. I mean, I'm gonna go and I'm like you. I mean, I've always said, my YouTube is for whatever hiking adventures, and Facebook is where I shared pictures. I'm not one of those Canadians who went to Facebook to get my news, but apparently there is I heard a number as high as like 20% of Canadians actually log on every day and get their news from Facebook.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's going to be interesting. I'm going to go look. I'm going to spend a couple of days next week when we talk. I'll have spent more time on Facebook than I have in a long time, but I'm going to go look at Facebook and Google and purposely do some searches and see how things are changing.
Fair enough.
God.
Speaking of things changing, we were going to get into the climate. How's that for a segue? But I'll let you start on this one because this is one that you brought up.
Yeah, climate change. I think we're all getting tired of it, and it's not going away. But I keep bringing up examples. So as an example today, I live on an acreage, and I had to decide. I have a rain barrel. Do I take water out of my rain barrel and go water my garden, or do I look at the weather forecast, see if there's a little bit of rain in the forecast? So this morning I logged on to I looked at my cell phone and I went to look at the forecast, and it says 16 degrees and a little bit of rain in the forecast. But then in big bold orange, there's a Environment Canada warning, a heat warning. It's 16 degrees, and the highest temperature forecast for Alberta for today was 24 degrees. It's currently pouring rain, and actually, I'm curious now. I'm just going to go look at my phone, see if So I posted a picture of that. Yeah, I posted a picture of that on Twitter, and everybody responded with pictures from their own geography, from their own areas, and same thing. There was warnings like that. I'll just show that it's orange. It's 15 degrees, and this is an orange. You can't read it, but it says heat warning.
Yeah, heat warning.
Heat warning. We're being bombarded by this, but I think finally Canadians are getting fed up. I'm optimistic that there are enough people that are seeing that, hey, you know what? Enough with this stuff, right? Canadians are smart enough to know that 16 degrees is not a heat wave, that a man-made forest fire started by an arsonist is not climate change, that a dock on the ocean that washed away after a season of ice is not climate change. I mean, this is enough of this stuff, So that's what I said before we started. I'm not going to go on a long rant on climate change, but it's constantly happening, and I'll constantly expose it. I mean, I was happy to share that with people and just make them think a little bit. you
Well,
know.
one good book that I read recently, and it's by Patrick Moore, who is one of the founders of Greenpeace, actually. And he left Greenpeace because he found that they became too politically driven rather than caring about actual like environmental issues. And he was more focused on actually correcting environmental issues. And most of us
Yep.
are, and
Yep.
I think most of us fall in that category. Especially in Canada, we're a little bit closer to nature, and we all have affinity to want to protect our surroundings and all of that. But this is where the climate alarmists come in and take that by the reins and say, okay, we can sell you something with with an ideology surrounding this. His recent book, "Fake Invisible Catastrophes and Threats of Doom," is actually a really good illustration of all the things that you hear about that are remote issues, like the coral. You hear stories about the coral. No, how many people have actually seen coral in their lifetime? You hear stories about the Arctic and the polar bears. How many people have actually
Oh,
seen the polar bears? How many people have actually seen this supposed what is it? The Great Pacific Garbage Patch that no actual satellite imagery has ever captured.
yeah,
There's a
I
bunch of
can
them.
zoom in on I can zoom in on Google Earth. You know, look at your own property on Google Earth, which is hilarious. Like I look at my property and I can see my truck parked in front of the house one year, and then the next year it's not there. You zoom in on that middle of the Pacific and look for that garbage patch. You ain't gonna find it.
No, it's
It ain't there.
nowhere to be found. And all the pictures of
Yeah,
it, it turns out, are like pictures after a famous tsunami in Japan in 2011. There's a lot of pictures of that are claiming to be that garbage patch. But the main illustration of the book, and I think it's a fascinating book, and people should pick it up and read it. It's a real easy read, and it's laid out in real simple terms. But it lays out the fact that a lot of these issues are remote issues, and they're way out there where you're never going to
right,
actually get to observe it. and
right.
and this is how they get you with this stuff. And when you actually look at the fact that polar bears are in greater numbers now today than they've ever been recorded, and it's largely due to the conservation of the polar bears. And in fact, they're getting so high that the Inuit are saying, we're having trouble, we
That
need
no,
to we need to call the herd.
that's a fantastic point. That they purposely pick things that you can't go see for yourself, right? So
Mm-hmm.
they'll put a picture of a seagull that's or a turtle that's trapped in a plastic net, make you believe there's a million of them, but you and I can't go verify that that's the fact because it's hard to go look at the turtles. I live that all the time, Clyde. I mean, when I'm in the mountains and and I have as a very minor example of that. I mean, there's people who quite honestly think that the forests are gone. You know, I get criticized for going into mountains, and I get criticized for making a fire. Like I made a fire last week when I was the video I published the other day. I'm making a fire, and
Yeah.
there's always inevitably there's somebody's like, you shouldn't burn the trees. I'm like, holy shit, folks! Like, come with me, man. Come with me. I could sit in the middle of the forest where I'm at for the next 100 years, and all I'm burning is the trees that are dead on the ground.
Yeah.
So yeah, people's perception is oh, I got lots of favorite topics like that.
People
I
need to
mean,
go
if
camping
it,
more, I think, is what it is. Like, just
yeah, well,
as a
if
kid
you got a
camping,
second,
I always were like, me and my older brothers, we would run and we'd get wood to burn in the fire. That's all. Parents sit in the chairs, and the kids go get wood to throw in the fire. It's
I,
it's readily available. It's all over the place, and you don't
it's
even
a
have to.
renewable resource.
It
Oh,
absolutely is.
it's a
And well, in fact,
yeah, yeah,
this
no,
is part of the thing that I've been covering recently, and even in yesterday's video, talking about forest fires and why they're actually raging so hot these days is largely to do with poor management of the forest. And we have so much fuel load on a lot of these forests that now, with what's happening, if the load gets too great, when the forest fires do roll through, because it's a normal occurrence, you actually get what they call a crown fire, where the tops of the trees and the entire forest burns. And then you have devastating issues where it leaves the soil sterile for like
I,
decades. And yeah, that's an issue, and it has to do with
it
not letting burning occur naturally.
absolutely, we need frequent burning instead of one big giant burning is what we need. I mean, I live out in the country. I live on an acreage, and I can't, I half my property is just wild grass. And what I should be doing is I should be doing a controlled burn, but that's completely banned. I am not allowed to do a controlled burn. So it's like, holy shit, man, you're I'm ultimately putting my property at risk, because that one fire that strikes in the backyard one day is just going to be out of control because there's so much dead brush. What I should
Mhm.
have is a small controlled burn every couple of years just to get rid of that dead brush. And then people bring up things like, oh, do it with this, do it with pesticides, or it's like, oh God, or mow it down or till it or do whatever. I'm like, God, there's an easy solution, and it's to just let nature do what it's supposed to do. You keep telling me to interfere when the solution is right there in front of me. Let it burn, or
Well,
cut it down,
I
or
always find it
yeah.
so funny that one of the solutions might be to use a whole lot of fossil fuels with equipment and take the stuff out of the forest, right? And it just leaves you wondering, scratching your head, going, where have we come? Where have we gone
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
here? Where is the logic? It's just out the
You're
window.
damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. Yeah, that's what it is. Hey, what else we got going today? Let's talk. Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, we've been doing
Yeah, we've
good,
been going pretty
man.
good. We've been going for 20
We
minutes.
can
So
talk forever. And I know you want to try and keep your videos under 20 minutes. So maybe we'll leave some stuff for next week.
well, I think that's what we'll do. I could have got into a bunch of the other issues that's going on in Canada right now, but I think we'll leave it. So, Marty, thank you so much. Where can people find you?
Marty Up North on Twitter and on YouTube, and just published a video a couple of days ago on YouTube up through a nice part of Jasper called Moline Lake. So, or not Moline Lake, Moline Pass, very rarely frequented. I could have a whole topic on that one, but it's a decommissioned trail that's been recommissioned because of popularity. So if somebody wants to see what that looks like, go look at it on Marty Up North.
All right.
Yep.
Links in, as always, in the description down below. Thanks again, Marty.
Yeah, thanks, Ben, and we'll see you next week. Actually, next week, are we in person? No, the week. Yeah, almost, right?
Almost, almost.
You're
Next
coming
week.
for a visit next week. Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll still do Wednesday, I think.
Until then, happy Canada Day long weekend to you, my friend.
Absolutely. Likewise.
All right, cheers.